Hey everyone, before we dive in, I wanted to share something exciting. You can now send us a text message directly from your favorite audio platform. Yes. So whether you've got a question, want to give us feedback, or just want to share your thoughts on the show, I'd love to hear from you. Look in the show notes at the very start and you will see the phrase, send us a text. Click that link, send us your message, and that's it. We can't wait to read them. Now, let's jump in with this episode.
And I'm looking at home plate and I can't see home plate. All I can see is the press box that's 30 rows behind home plate because I can't
Wow.
focus. I think
Right.
it's, and then there's times where you're out there pitching and you don't even realize that there's 10,000 people in the stands yelling and screaming because you're so focused.
Today on the show, former Vanderbilt and Cincinnati Reds right-handed pitcher Drew Hayes is up next. Welcome back to the Fifth Quarter Podcast. I'm your host, Sandy Adams, and this is where we dive deep into the world of sports, talking with retired athletes, current athletes, and everyone that makes the sports world great. A quick reminder, if you're not already subscribed to the podcast, make a note, subscribe to the show wherever you listen or watch. You can find all the info at 5thquarterpodcast.com. Now, grab your iced tea or your coffee. Get ready to be motivated and inspired because this is where the real stories are told. Now, let's talk about today's guest, the show's very first baseball player. He's a former Cincinnati Reds right-handed pitcher and the current pitching coach for the AAA affiliate of the Toronto Blue Jays. Side note, we also share the same hometown. I couldn't be more excited to welcome to the show Drew Hayes.
Hey, Sandy, thanks for having me on. I'm really excited about our conversation, and it was really good to catch up with you a little bit on our hometown and all the people that we know.
Absolutely. We were talking in the for all of you out there, we're going to get into it. We're both from McKenzie, Tennessee. We actually both graduated from McKenzie High School. You much later in life than me. But yeah, I grew up with your sister, for anybody that's wondering how we know each other. And I'm just the first time I ever heard about you was, I think, when you got drafted right out of high school. And I'm like, who is he? Like, I didn't even know you existed. And so then I just kind of followed up a little bit. I will tell you a quick side note. I took a 6-week road trip back in 2010, and you were playing in Billings, Montana.
Yeah.
And somebody had told me that, because I was going up to Montana, and somebody was like, Drew is playing on that team. If you can go to a game, go. But you were playing out of town, and I was only there for one night. So you were safe. I didn't come out there and make a fool out of myself.
Billings is beautiful, though.
It is. I loved Montana. I loved Wyoming. I loved Montana. I just loved it all. Let's dive into really quickly. Who are you today? If you could give me one sentence, how would you kind of describe yourself?
Hopefully it's the same way other people would describe me, but I try to be a really good husband, and I try to just be somebody that others can count on, and a really hard worker at my job. I try to really prioritize my family and my wife, our relationship with God, and just try to work as hard as I can every day.
Well, you couldn't ask for anything more than that. So let's start off with your current job. Tell everybody what you're doing and what exactly that makes up.
So I started with the Toronto Blue Jays in 2020, just before the pandemic happened. And then starting in 21, when we were actually able to play again, I started as the pitching coach at our low A affiliate, which plays out of the spring training complexes in Florida, in Dunedin, Florida, just about 30 minutes outside of Tampa. I was there for 2021 and 2022. And then in 23, I moved to New Hampshire with our double A affiliate and was the pitching coach there. And then I spent this past summer in Buffalo, New York as our triple A pitching coach. And really my job is at the lower levels, it's to really try to develop younger pitchers, whether they be our younger Latin American pitchers that we've signed out of the Dominican Republic, Venezuela, Brazil, Puerto Rico. And then as I've moved up, it's more to try to really refine some of those same players and some new players to really try to help our major league affiliate, the Blue Jays, to achieve our goal of bringing a championship to Canada, and to help them win as many games as they can and hopefully win a World Series.
I kind of have a connection to Toronto. George Springer, he played in Houston.
Oh, yeah.
I lived in Houston for 16 years. Love George Springer. He's probably my favorite baseball player out of the Houston Astros. let's talk about, so a side note, because I'm curious about this. When those players get draft, I'm sure all of them come to the teams through draft. Is that correct? They all come through the draft to your.
The domestic players, the United States and the Puerto Rican players come through the draft. The any international free agents such as Dominican Republic, Venezuela, Brazil, they're in the international signing pool. So those players are not subject to the draft. The domestic
Okay.
players in the United States and Puerto Rico and Canada are subject to the draft.
So what is the age range when they come to you?
Um, we've signed them and as young as 16, but a lot of times at 16 in the international pool, they would go to our complex in Dominican Republic first, or be at the complex in Florida playing out of the PDC, which doesn't play as many games. When I was in
Right.
Low A in Dunedin, at a full season affiliate, our youngest player I think I had there was 17. So generally they're anywhere from 17 to 22, 23, which are the college seniors that come out of the draft that we get. And then this year in Buffalo, the age range was anywhere from 21 years old to 36, 34, somewhere around
Mhm.
there. Or
Do
no,
you
sorry,
split?
38. I actually coached a player that was older than me this year, which was a pretty
Oh my.
unique experience.
How do you divide your time between wherever you're working and then Mackenzie?
Yes. So we'll leave. I know I get a lot of questions about this, like what this work
Yeah.
life balance looks like. So we'll leave about the first week of February and head down to Dunedin for spring training. We'll be in Dunedin for spring training until the end of March, and then at the end of March, I leave and go to wherever our affiliate is. Whether in Dunedin it was moving across the street from the complex, or last year it's taking a flight from Tampa to Buffalo. And then when the season was over with, this year at the end of September, Mariah and I come back home to Mackenzie. We have a house here, so we come back here for the off season, and I'll travel occasionally for a week or two in the off season to work camps at the facility or something like that in Florida.
Okay. That kind of gives you a little bit of excitement. You're not doing like a 9 to 5 job every day. When you are there at the facility, what is your daily, like, what is your daily work routine like?
So in spring training at the facility and at the affiliate during the season are two different kind of schedules. At spring training, things start at the complex as early as like 7 in the morning. So generally, I'm up at 4:45, heading into the
Wow.
complex, working out in the morning, usually about 5:30, and then we usually have a staff meeting around 7. And then we
Mhm.
go through the day with practice in the morning, starting around 9:30. And then once games have started, those games start about 1 o'clock, and so we go work the game, and then we're generally leaving the complex around 6. So it's about a 12-hour day.
Wow.
Excuse me.
Um,
And then during the season, it's almost the same schedule. It just gets pushed later because the games are at usually 7 o'clock at night on a normal schedule without a day game, and so it's just getting there a little later. But it's about a 12-hour day either way.
do they play all the games locally or do you travel for the
In
games?
spring training,
Well, in the regular season of
in the
of the.
regular season, we travel. So this year in Buffalo, I'm trying to remember everywhere we played, but we went Rochester, New York, Syracuse, New
Mm,
York, Durham, North Carolina, Gwinnett, Georgia, Indianapolis, Columbus. So we split, just kind of like the major league. We
yeah.
split half home games, half away games.
But some of those Durham, North Carolina, that's a pretty good piece from Buffalo.
Yes,
Um,
it is.
yeah,
When I was in Florida and Dunedin, the Florida State League is a lot more compact. It's the farthest trip was probably 3 hours, and then as you
right.
get into affiliates and leagues that are a little bit larger, it gets into some 10, 12 hour trips or even flights on some of them.
Okay. Let's go back to where it all started. When did you actually start playing baseball?
So my earliest memory is me and my dad playing baseball in the side yard, at our first house, and that's
Mhm.
where I really got started. And then started playing t-ball at the age of 3, and played from the time I was 3 until I was 29, I think.
And I do want to note your dad was a baseball coach. How long was he a baseball coach?
Dad was a baseball coach at Bethel University here in McKenzie for, I believe, 18 years. I could be wrong on that, but I believe it was about 18 years.
Did he
And his
play? Did he play in high school?
Yeah, he played in high school and some semi-pro,
Okay.
and whenever he was younger. And just side note, actually, I'm sure we'll get into it later. I was lucky enough. Dad's last year of coaching was I got to play for him in college that year, so that was kind of his farewell. Was the year that I was there. So
Well, that was a good way to go out. But yeah, we'll get into that in just a little bit. So, was there ever did you play any other sports? I know the
yeah,
answer, but for everybody out there.
Yeah, I did. Growing up, I played everything as a kid, just in youth sports. As I got into middle school and high school, I focused on football, basketball, and baseball, and really focused on those three and played those three.
Why baseball?
I really enjoyed football and really enjoyed the challenge of football. But I think being an under 6 foot, not very fast quarterback, I didn't have much chance to advance there. And so baseball was just, where I thought I had a higher upside and could, I could have gone to college to play football at some places, but had some higher opportunities with baseball, and it seemed to be the route that was going to give me the best chance to achieve my goals of playing professionally.
Did you ever find a moment? I always like to ask a lot of the athletes this. Did you ever find a moment where you just fell in love with your sport? All right, before we get into the next topic, I want to take a quick moment to tell you about something that can really help you level up your personal brand. I've created an exclusive new book called The Visionary Personal Brand Playbook. It's perfect for those of you who have big goals but aren't exactly sure how to make your brand stand out, or for that matter, where to even start. It's packed with actionable tips that you can start using right now, today. If you're interested, head over to my website at sandy-adams.com/playbook and grab your copy. Now back to the show.
I think I always did, and I think like it's one of those weird things where you kind of fall in. As I got into the professional ranks, really, you start to fall in and out of love a little bit.
Yeah.
Like in high school, when my high school team was guys that I grew up playing with from the time that I was 5 years old in t-ball all the way through our senior year of high school. So I think that makes it pretty easy to love it because you're doing it with your best friends, you're doing it with the people that you love the most. And as you know, McKinsey's a really small community of 5,000 people. So like being able to represent the community in that sense, I feel like that made me love it in that because it was just so much fun and it was such an enjoyable time. And then as I progressed, like I said, you go in and out of love with it a little bit through the ups and the downs. And I was lucky enough to spend 2 winters playing in the the Dominican Winter League, where I got to go down. It wasn't associated with the Reds. It wasn't associated with anything. It was solely focused on winning games for that team that also represented the community in the Dominican Republic. And I think those 2 winters are kind of when I really fell back in love with it to a pretty high degree and really started to enjoy it and found some more joy in what I was doing on a day-to-day basis.
What was the Dominican stint? Was that after college?
It was actually in the middle of my stint with the Reds where they would allow me to go play winter ball. And so it was 2013. I think it was 2013 or 2014, 2015. I went down to the Dominican and played for about a month and a half each year.
I do want to give a shout out because you guys, when you're in high school, you won the 2006 Tennessee State Championship for baseball,
Yes.
Our only state title to date. So that must be pretty exciting as well. What was your college recruitment like in high school? Were you getting recruited for both football and baseball, or were you like, what was that like?
Yeah, I think I got recruited a lot more for football, honestly, than I did for baseball, just because I think I had some more accolades in football, especially early on. The football recruitment scene with camps and summer camps and things like that was a little more advanced than the baseball recruitment scene at that time.
Right.
And so I got recruited more for football. Like I said, I got recruited by some bigger schools, but really probably had a chance to play at some smaller schools. And then my baseball recruitment really didn't ramp up until I went to some college camps the winter of my senior year, right before my senior season of baseball. I went to Mississippi State, I went to Vanderbilt, and that's when I really started to talk to some people about pursuing SEC baseball. And I didn't really. And before that, I just thought I was going to go play football most likely.
That's interesting. I interviewed Andre Turner. He played for the University of Memphis State basketball.
Yeah,
He played baseball all the way up through his senior year, and he actually wanted to play baseball professionally or in college.
yeah,
And he ended up at the last moment deciding to play basketball, which I always find that interesting. Not every guest on here has had multiple sports, but I do like it's interesting why one chooses that route versus the other one. Um, what do you think, looking at the recruitment process today for high school students and for baseball, is it much more advanced now than it was when you were in high school?
yes, drastically. I think. I mean, now seeing kids that get recruited their freshman year of high school or committing
Yeah.
their sophomore year of high school to go to places when you can't sign for 2 more years. So the landscape's changed dramatically. I think the landscape of travel baseball, tournaments, showcases, things like that have drastically changed it. Whether it's for the better or for the worse, not one to say probably, but it definitely has changed, and it probably makes kids make a decision quite a bit earlier than what I had to. Like I didn't I didn't know I was going to play college baseball until my senior year, and these kids are committing their freshman sophomore years of high school.
Yeah, it's really crazy. Just all the sports, the recruitment, and just how everything has drastically changed. Was there pressure on you being the son of a baseball coach?
Yeah, I think there was pressure, but I don't think it was an unhealthy pressure. I feel like I was just expected to play, but like I said, I love playing. So,
Yeah.
there was pressure, but it was, and there was pressure to be good, but there was the pressure existed because my dad saw the amount of potential that I had, and I think the pressure was more from him than it was from anybody else. I think, the expectation from everybody else was everybody just played, but
Yeah.
for me growing up, it was, we're not just playing just for fun. We're playing for fun, but we're playing to be good and to excel and to be the best that we can, wherever that ends up being, whether that ends up being as a major leaguer or whether that ends up being as a high school player. It's trying to be the best player that I could be at whatever level I was at.
So now let's get into that college decision. So you decided to go to Bethel University, which is in our hometown. What led you up to make that decision?
It was actually a really interesting process. As I said, I thought I was going to play football, baseball ended up looking like it was going to be the route for me. I took a visit to Birmingham Southern in Birmingham, Alabama, and was pretty set on I was going to go to Birmingham Southern. Coach Shoup that was there, they came on kind of late in my recruitment and were pretty strong. And I felt really good about that. The day that we won the state championship, my senior year of high school was also the day that Birmingham Southern voted to go Division III instead of Division I. And all the baseball coaches left,
Oh,
all the players were leaving, and they didn't even end up having a team the next year. So the day we won the state
oh
championship,
my
my
God.
my I was going to sign probably in the next 2 or 3 days, and then now my recruitment kind of opened all the way back up. And I talked to Coach Backich, who was the recruiting coordinator at Vanderbilt. And I could have gone there that first year. They had a really good team. That was the year David Price was there, Casey Weathers was there. They were ranked number one for the majority of the year. He was really honest with me. Said there's a chance you're going to redshirt. There's maybe not a lot of innings that are available from the pitching staff. If you want to go to Bethel and do that, and then we can, we'll obviously can keep in touch if something comes open or whatever else. So that led me to go to Bethel that first year, and I wasn't ready to leave home yet. I don't think either. I don't think I was mature
Yeah.
enough or ready for that. I think that, especially looking back, I made a good decision by going to Bethel that first year to get my feet wet and better prepare myself to move away from home, because you know how it is where we're from. Not many people leave McKenzie, or
They
as
don't.
far as people go, is going 2 hours to Memphis or 2 hours to Nashville. So I wasn't prepared, but that it ended up being a really kind of crazy path, but a path that ended up being the best thing for me.
My freshman year of college, I went to Memphis. There were, I think, four other people from Mackenzie that went to Memphis. I was the only one that lasted through the next year.
Yeah.
Everybody else moved home or
Yeah.
went someplace else or did something. Was your dad already coaching at Bethel when you made that? Oh, yes, you were. You said that
Yeah.
ended up being his last year.
Yeah.
Um, what was that process like when you, because obviously for those of you that out there that don't know, literally I feel like Bethel is like in your backyard, like it really is.
Yeah.
What was that process like though, to basically go from a couple of streets over and then go to this other campus where your dad's actually coaching and you're playing for him? What was that all like?
It was wonderful. I mean, I ended up playing on a team with players that, like I said, I didn't think I was going to go to Bethel for a good amount of time, but I was always around Dad's teams that were at Bethel, so I ended up playing with kind of guys that
Oh,
were my idols. As I'm in high school, like I want to be like this guy that plays for my dad's team, or
right.
this one of the assistant coaches on Dad's team. I grew up with him being a player there and then a coach, and so it was a really cool experience for me because it was from a young age. You know how to, like in McKenzie, you look up to the people that are playing at Bethel. They're the ones you go to the basketball, football,
Right.
baseball games and watch. And so now I am one of them and I'm with them. And it was a really cool experience for me. I lived at home that first year, so sometimes the dynamic between dad and I would be a little bit strange if I didn't pitch or play real well. But it was one of the best years of my life. I got to play here in our hometown. I got to play for my dad in his last year in college. I got to spend time with people that I'd gone to high school with and played in high school with. I got to make new friends that I'm still friends with to this day. It was one of the best years of my life and one of the best experiences. And like I said, I don't think I would have had the success I had later in life if I hadn't gone to Bethel for that year and really gotten introduced into college, developed my work ethic further, and really kind of seen the next step of what it was going to take to be as good as I wanted to be.
I see that a lot now. These kids are in such a hurry to get to college and then get to the pros, whether they're either even good enough or not. Um, but there is something, I've seen several athletes that, have started at the community college, gone a year, then found a better opportunity at maybe a D2 or then a lesser D1 school, and then taken that opportunity to then, catapult them into a better situation in a D1 school and come out doing really well. Um, I think there is something to be said about that development and not rushing from, high school directly into, like, I'm never about basketball, like going directly to the pros. I just don't think that's a good fit, no matter what the sport is. Um, Looking back now, do you think there was anything else that could have helped you develop better as a freshman in college and just kind of helped you navigate those waters that first year?
Um, I mean, I think the only thing would be having been away from home. I think that was the biggest change when I did go to Vanderbilt and get into professional baseball. Is I was I was on my own for classes and things like that. But I think the only way that you can truly figure out how to live in a new city or live farther away from your family or to essentially grow up is to go do it. There's nothing that I don't think can really prepare you for that other than the experience of it. And I see it a lot with our players now with the Blue Jays is especially at the lower levels or the Dominican or Venezuelan players that come
Yeah.
to the United States for the first time. They're shell shocked and they it takes an adjustment period and sometimes that adjustment period affects performance. And so I think the biggest thing for that is you have to do the experience and you have to be open to it and you have to be willing to fail a little bit when you first do it. And so I think that would have been the only thing. And I ended up getting that later in life. But I think, yeah, there's no substitute for the experience of just having to grow up on your own and mature when it kind of hits you in the face.
It does. I agree with that. So, going into college, what was your declared major?
Education.
And did you already have, like, obviously were you thinking pro at that point when you entered
Yeah,
Bethel? Were you thinking pro?
yes, I think so. I was, planning on it. Dad had taught, or dad, sorry, dad had coached at Bethel for a long time. I kind of just always thought I would be a coach. If I wasn't going to be a player, I just thought I would be a coach. Like that's what I would do because that's what kind of dad had done. My mom was
Right.
a pharmacist growing up, and she told me you don't want to be a pharmacist. So I was kind of thought that I just wanted to coach, and that the path for that was to get my education degree and my teaching license and all of those things. And so that's what I went to school for. But the plan for me was always, hopefully play as long as I can and then coach at whatever level that might have been.
So you did have a plan B. A lot of people we've had on here didn't have a plan B. More so the women had a plan B. Or actually pro sports was their plan B.
Yeah.
Plan A was a degree.
Yeah.
And I always find that fascinating. So the switch from Bethel to Vanderbilt and playing in the SEC, that had to have been some adjustment there.
Yeah, it definitely was. I think I mean, if nothing else, the amenities, like what you're seeing, the
Mm-hmm.
facilities that you have, the gear that you get. Then once we get into games, the crowds, the travel, the student section. The student section at Ole Miss for a baseball game is insane. It's a little bit different than playing at Freed Hardeman. It's so it was, but it was there was an adjustment period, I think. But there was, I think I never felt overwhelmed. I never felt like I couldn't play there. And I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of that came from my first year at Vanderbilt. I can still remember it. And I remember it as one of the turning points that like kind of allowed me to feel comfortable like I could pitch was Pedro Alvarez was our best player. He ended up getting picked second in the draft later that year. We're playing our black and gold series in the fall, and I faced him in like the seventh or eighth inning of a game with runners on base, and ended up striking him out. And I was like, oh, okay, if I can get him out, I'm okay here. Like I can pitch here. And so the adjustment period was on field was that, off field and the conditioning and school, there was an adjustment period there as well. But I think that moment kind of let me know and prepared me ahead of the actual season starting that I was comfortable enough to be able to compete there.
Did you ever have self-doubts though about your ability to perform at the highest level?
Yeah, I think if anybody says that they don't, I think they're not being truthful. I think
Sure.
because when you're getting your teeth kicked in and you have for two or three outings in a row as a pitcher, you start to have self doubt. You start to wonder if if I throw this pitch in the strike zone, it's going to get hit really hard. Or there was times in my career where I couldn't throw a strike, and the home plate starts to look like it's the size of an AirPod case, and there's no chance to throw a strike. So yeah, I think there's self doubt, but I think the best medicine for self doubt is to keep doing it. And once you have success, the self doubt kind of goes away.
That's true. What something that I kind of think about is that, I look at a baseball game, and even though you're all a team, you're all spread out. And then I look at football and I look at basketball, and they're still teams, but they're like closer together. So the players are not as visibly standing out from each other. As a pitcher on a mound, you're basically in the spotlight, and that light can be really bright. How did you handle? I mean, let's
Yes.
especially like if it's being televised or anything. I mean, they're like zooming in on you. How did you handle that in those SEC games?
I think it went back and forth. Honestly, I can remember a time my junior year at Vanderbilt, we're playing at MTSU, and I had been struggling. And I'm looking at home plate, and I can't see home plate. All I can see is the press box that's 30 rows behind home plate because I can't
Wow.
focus. I think
Right.
it's and then there's times where you're out there pitching, and you don't even realize that there's 10,000 people in the stands yelling and screaming because you're so focused. So I think it's a mental performance piece to it. It's being able to insulate, and a lot of that comes from the work that you put in prior. I try to preach that to our players a lot. Is that
Yes.
you can only control what you can control. If you put in the work prior and you know that you're prepared, and then being able to have the mental, just the mental performance aspect of focus and blocking things out and solely focusing on the things that you can control that are right in front of you, then those are the times where you don't realize that the light is so bright.
Yeah.
Whenever you're doubting or you haven't put in the work, that's why I laughed when you said it, because the light gets really bright and you can't see anything.
It does. What were some of the, was there, so I know everybody has superstitions, baseball players, football players, basketball players, everybody have superstitions. What was your routine like before a game?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously the pregame work is several hours before the game, but
Mm,
before a game, I was pretty regimented with an hour before the game, I would kind of shut everything off and start listening to music. I had the same playlist that I listened to almost from the time I started in professional baseball till the end, just to try to get what we talked about
yeah.
earlier, getting into that mental space where I could block everything else out and cut out the distractions. So yeah, I mean, I did the same as a relief pitcher. I did the same thing from the first inning. I did the same thing in the first inning, the second inning, the third inning, the fourth inning, almost every single game that I was available to pitch, because it would just got me into the space where I thought I could focus and be ready to
Yeah.
compete to the best of my ability.
Okay, let's talk about the draft, because this, as I said, this was how I first really found out who you were. So you got drafted, I think, right out of high school, drafted at 29, or number 29 by Arizona. You did not sign. You got drafted again in 2009, number 22 by Seattle. And then 2010, you got 11th by Cincinnati. Why did you put off those first two?
Honestly, the first one, getting drafted in the 29th round by Arizona out of high school, I didn't even, I mean, I had talked to a couple of scouts, but I didn't really anticipate getting drafted. And that was more, I got drafted as a shortstop by Arizona.
Hmm.
And so I just didn't feel like I was ready, honestly, to go. We talked to them a little bit, and I think us and Arizona both agreed that, it was probably best route for me to go ahead and go to
Yeah.
college, forego that and then go to college. And then after my junior year at Vanderbilt, once you go to a 4-year school, you can't get drafted after your freshman and sophomore year unless you're over 21. I think
Oh,
that's the
I
rule.
didn't know that. Yeah.
At a junior college, you can, but so the next time I was able to get drafted was after my junior year at Vanderbilt. And that year, honestly, I did want to sign. My parents and I talked about it a long time. I wanted to sign. I was ready to go. I thought I was. And then as I thought about it, and I was playing in summer ball in Cape Cod, which is a really good collegiate summer ball league. And as I talked to Coach Corbin at Vanderbilt and really thought through it, I wasn't ready. I thought I wasn't ready. And I think I still tell people to this day, if I had signed with Seattle then, I don't think I make it to the major leagues because I don't think I was mentally or physically as prepared as what I should have been. And then I went back for my senior year at Vanderbilt, struggled a little bit early in the year, really pitched well towards the end of the year, which allowed me to get drafted in the 11th round that year. And then obviously signed. But yeah, the first one was more so I definitely wasn't ready. And me and the team both agreed that with Seattle, I finally just came to a decision one night that I wasn't ready and I needed to go back. So,
it takes someone that has some insight into themselves to be able to make that decision not to sign. I think, there's a lot of people that would probably just go ahead and sign and not think about the consequences or not think necessarily about if they're ready. But that does show a lot of maturity that you looked at yourself and was like, I'm not ready. And you came back and your your draft number increased like over half
yeah.
or went down
Yeah.
over half or whatever. I'm not a math
Yeah.
person.
No, I mean, I probably wasn't as mature as I should have been, but I was lucky enough to have some really good people around me that helped me
Mhm.
make that decision and kind of put things into perspective and then was able to finally make that decision. And like I said, I still think it was the right one. But it ended up working out okay.
Um, let's go on and talk about so you sign. What was the because I've never I'm gonna be honest, I've never really watched a baseball draft. Because I think they're like what, 10 days, 9 days?
Uh, 3 days, but it used to
Three
be
days.
50. It used to be 50 rounds, and they've knocked it down to 20 rounds now.
Okay. So what was that process like? Were you there where the draft happened? I'm only really familiar with basketball. So what was that process like for us people that don't know anything?
So my senior year, the draft actually took place while we were still in the NCAA tournament. We were in between the first round of the NCAA tournament and the second. We had just finished beating Louisville in a regional tournament at Louisville, and we were actually practicing in between that and going to Florida State for the Super Regional for a chance to go to Omaha. And honestly, we had just finished practice, and I was walking back to the dorm and got a call from the Red Scout that was, hey, we're thinking about taking you here. This is how much that we're planning on offering as a signing bonus. Are you going to take it or not? And then me getting in touch with my agent at the time, and agreeing that was probably best case scenario and agreeing to it. So I was not there. I was actually just finished with practice, it was a pretty interesting dynamic.
So it's like asking you out for a date. They ask you first. It's like passing a note. Will you go out with me? And then they ask. Like
Yeah.
that's crazy.
Yeah, I think and as far as I know, it's pretty commonplace. Is like, hey, this is the number we're planning on giving you, or at least this range, and then we can
Mhm.
negotiate some after. At least with some of the later rounds, with the first and second round, it may not be as much that way, but the later rounds, I think it generally is like that.
Well, and I guess that makes more sense because you don't want to waste a pick and lose somebody only to find out that person does not want to be drafted or does not want that amount or something like that. That actually does make sense. So, what happened after that? Did you guys make it to Omaha?
We did not. We lost to Florida State
Okay.
in the third game of a 3-game series to go to Omaha that year.
Did you ever make it to Omaha?
No, we didn't. The farthest we made it while I was there was the Super Regional, which was we were one game from Omaha, and then the next year, 2011, was the first year that Vandy made it to Omaha.
I've been wanting to go to there because my brother lives there and the College World Series, but it's like 2 weeks long and that
Yeah,
stadium is like in full sun and I just
yes.
can't do it. I just can't. Um okay, so what happens after that? You get drafted, you finish the NCAA tournament. What happens then?
Like I said, they give you like a range or around a number that they're going to give you. I waited a couple of weeks and was at home just kind of sorting out with my agent exactly what we were going to do. So I signed a little bit late because we were in Florida State, and then went home for a week or two. And then that's the year I was in Billings, Montana. I went straight to Billings, had a flight straight to Billings, Montana, go in, get my physical in Billings, and then start, well, at the time, what was called short season that doesn't really exist anymore, but it was started in Billings that year. Played through that season, get finished with that, go home for a week or two, then go straight to Arizona for what was called instructional league, which was just kind of more games for newer guys in the organization to kind of get further evaluation or more opportunities to prove yourself. And then going into the off season after that.
So, what were some of how long did you play in the minors?
From 2010 to 2016. So the minor league contract at that time was 7 years. So I played out the full minor league contract.
So you have to sign you sign a multi-year contract to play in the minors?
Yes, I mean, it is multi-year, but they can release you at any point that they want to. It's not like it's a guaranteed 7 years.
So, I guess it's to make you feel more comfortable, but really they can just get rid of you.
Yeah, it's every year new players are getting drafted or signed,
Yeah.
so players are getting released and things like that.
What was the hardest part about playing in the minors?
I think it's so just for context, it was then the amenities and the pay for minor leaguers was not very good, honestly. It's gotten quite a bit better through some bargaining negotiation. So we weren't getting paid very much. There weren't very good places to live unless you had a host family.
Right.
And then the stadiums and the locker rooms were we one of the places we went to in Loe, my second year, had dirt floor in the locker room.
Oh my God.
And it was just in from outside. If it rained or it was wet, the floor was mud. So I think just going through some of those struggles where coming from the SEC, going into that, it's a little bit different. Getting used to that. But I think for me, even at Vanderbilt in Nashville, I was close to family. I was close to friends. They could come see me anytime they wanted to. And then I get finished there and go to Billings, Montana, where, I mean, my parents came to visit once, but you're not seeing anybody that you know for
Yeah.
a long period of time. So I think it was kind of what we were talking about earlier, like the emotional piece of growing up, and you have to have that experience in order to do it. I think it was just kind of learning to live on my own completely, to be professional, because at that point it's a job, you're getting paid.
Yeah.
And so I think just learning how to grow up and how to be a professional, and being away from home and managing all the emotional things that go on with that, whether it's you're talking to friends at home or you have relationships or talking to your parents or sorting out what you're going to do for the off season or where you're going to live. There's a lot of things that go into it. So I think it was just for a lot of guys, I think in the minor league, it's learning to grow up and starting to have those first times of being away from something that's pretty comfortable.
What did you do when you were not playing and not training?
So I was always training in the off season. I would take maybe a week off, and then you get back into lifting and working out. But honestly, for me, when I would come home in the off season to McKenzie, I would help Coach Comer with the high school football team. I came back and would help coach there during football season, and then I would do had my teaching degree, so I would do substitute teaching at the
Bless your
local
heart.
schools here.
Bless your heart. I've done that. I lasted 6 months. Now, when you were in season and you were not at a game and you were not training, what filled that empty space?
I generally during season we would live with other players. So I had two or
Mm,
three players that I generally lived with almost every year. And it's a combo of going out to eat, video
right.
games, music, whatever it may be, however you could fill your time that didn't have anything to do with baseball for the most part, just trying to get away from it a little bit. But there's not a lot of downtime because I mean, even when I was playing, we were at the field usually by noon or 1 o'clock and then leaving by 10, 11 o'clock at night. So there's a little time for video
Wow.
games and then sleep and get up and start over.
Wow. That is a grind. So, what were you or where were you when you got the call to go up to the major leagues?
So our AAA team was in Louisville. I was at Louisville. I had an idea that it could happen at some point relatively soon. I was in the stadium after a game. We had a night game in Louisville. I was in the locker room after the game, and our manager at the time, Delano DeShields, he came and got me and told me, and then I drove to Cincinnati the next morning.
What made you think there was a possibility?
I had pitched really well in spring training that year. I thought
Okay.
actually I had a chance to make the team out of spring training. Didn't, and then had a pretty decent start to the year. So I just knew that coming out of spring training there was a chance. The Reds weren't very good that year, to be honest. And some of the bullpen pitchers had been struggling. So I just had a there's you kind of always know in the game like when there may be somebody going up, somebody
Right.
going down, and kind of who the two or three people are that probably have a chance for that. And so yeah, I just knew there was kind of a chance, and then it ended up happening. So it was awesome.
How do you prepare yourself to go to that next level in play?
Similar to what we've talked about. I don't know if you can completely prepare, but you try to just make it the same thing as what you've been doing in the minor leagues, and that's what we tell players now. I try to is it's the same game. It's no different. It's a lot
Mhm.
of the same players you play against in the minor leagues, and then obviously there's the George Springers of the world that aren't the same players as the ones you play in the minor leagues. But you try to focus on the things that you can control. You can't control how good the person is that you're facing. All you can control is
Right.
is what you do with the ball. And so just trying to really stay internal and have a solid mental performance process there.
I would think for the guys that are coming from overseas or from like down south, I would think that it's possibly harder to prepare them just because they've not played as long in certain settings and they're not necessarily, here we can go to a baseball game in a major league, baseball field. But how do you prepare those guys now as a coach?
I think it's a lot of debrief after the game. We have meetings the day after guys pitch every time to just kind of go over the
Mm,
game, go over the outing. For our starting pitchers that sit in the dugout during games, a lot of times I try to have them sit near me or at least spend some time near me because you want to talk through situations, talk through what you should do in different situations, talk through how the game's played out, what's going on in this situation, where should you be if the ball's hit over here, different things like that. And honestly, to your point, it's talked a little bit about the travel ball scene of where we are now and the showcases and
mm,
kids don't grow up as much playing organized games as much. They're going to a lot of the showcases
yeah.
that they play one inning and then they're finished, and so they don't actually learn the game. That was something our manager in AAA and I talked about a lot this year. Is the art of really knowing the game and what you should be doing in certain settings and what you do in certain situations is getting lost. And when we were coming up, it was just understood that you were supposed to know those things. And now the game's
Right.
changed a little bit. And to your point, when you get players from Latin America that haven't played in as many organized games, because that's kind of always been more of a showcase setting. It's a lot of just teaching the game and talking through it on a debrief setting, or even before the game and just like an anticipatory situation. And we try to do that a lot in spring training. We try to do that a lot, especially at the lower levels, with the hopes that by the time they get to the AAA major league level, that it's kind of already ingrained in them.
Um, something that because I'm going to be honest, I did not grow up liking baseball at all. Didn't really like baseball, hated it until like 2017. Houston had flooded the Astros. I know there's a lot of controversy about them, but um, the Astros, they went to the World Series and Justin Verlander got traded from Detroit. I only knew about who he was because of his girlfriend. He got traded. But I really started paying attention like during the World Series, and it's going to be Game 5. Like I really started paying attention to the game, the strategy behind it. Um, what I have found interesting is the relationship between the catcher and the pitcher, and especially and my only references for Houston, Maldonado at the time was the catcher and had been for several years, and they really talked about how his relationship with the pitcher helped control the game, so to speak, the rhythm of the game and that kind of thing. What is that generally the way it is for most teams? Is there that relationship between the catcher and the pitcher?
Yeah, with good teams, with people that are good. Yeah, generally it's a really strong relationship. When I talked earlier about living with different people, and when we were coming up through the minor leagues, generally I lived with our two catchers. I had the same two catchers almost every year all the way up through the minor leagues, and those were generally my roommates during the season. So I was really close with them, and we really try to encourage that now with the Blue Jays at every level is the relationship and conversations between the catchers and the pitchers is the most important, because if they're not on the same page, those are the two people that start the play, right? Like the catcher calls
Right.
the sign and the pitcher has to throw the pitch that the catcher's called. And so that relationship is the most important. And if those two aren't on the same page or haven't had communication, and obviously there's times where players come up from double A to triple A and they've never thrown to the catcher before. But to your point, we were really lucky this year in triple A. We had catchers that as soon as a new pitcher got there, because that relationship is so important, they immediately went to them in the locker room and they're talking through what they want to do, what they like to do, the certain things that they like do in game, how they're going to communicate, things like that. So yeah, that relationship is for pitchers, it's the most important.
Interesting. Okay, so now talk about those. How many weeks did you play in Major League?
If I remember right, it was like 4, 5.
Okay. What was that whole time like for you? Was it ups
Really,
and downs?
really quick. I feel like it snapped my fingers and it was over with.
um, what did you take from that experience? What did you learn from that experience?
Um, I think I learned that, I went there and I honestly feel like that I tried to do more than what I had tried to do in the minor leagues. I felt like I tried to
Mm,
be too perfect. I felt like I put even more pressure on myself to be perfect. And,
right.
I took from it that, I don't always have to do more. And it's kind of carried over into other aspects of my life now, that it's just not like being who I am is okay. And I don't have to be somebody else. I don't have to be more. My talent level at that point in my career, I was probably never going to be a closer in the major leagues or like a multi-year starting pitcher for a team.
Right.
But I could have been a really solid bullpen pitcher for 2 or 3 years, I think. But I didn't give myself that opportunity. And I think that learning from that was something that's helped me later in life. Obviously, I wish I'd learned it a little earlier and could have applied it. But yeah, I think that was probably the biggest takeaway for me.
I see that everything you went through prepared you to help other people do more and help them get through that. And I think that's a good takeaway. Drew, you did more than the average kid has done. Like, I think a lot of people don't give themselves enough credit for where they got. The thing that I've learned, and you're going to be this is going to be episode number 60. And the thing that I have seen and listened to these people is that um, they don't necessarily take a moment to give themselves credit for how far they got and just how many people are waiting to take their spot. Like how many people. And I think that that's, incredible experience for you and for everybody that you coach now.
Yeah, I think it's a fine line too, because I think the best competitors and the people that are at the top of the sports world that are the best, you never are satisfied. You always are looking to
Right.
get better and improve. But to your point, it is. I think we're doing ourselves a disservice if we don't realize where we started to where we got to, and allow a little bit of time for reflection on that. But I really do feel that you can't. There's a certain small amount of time you can do that, and then you have to keep looking at how you can improve and get better. Because, to your point, if you're not, then there's somebody else
Oh,
that's
yeah.
looking to take your job always.
At least 20, 30 people are waiting to take your job.
Yes.
Absolutely. Um, after that stint with the Reds, what then happened? How did you decide to retire from competition?
So I finished with the Reds in 2016. Like I said, my minor league contract was up. And so I wasn't with the organization anymore. I went into 2017 hoping to sign with another organization,
Mm-hmm.
and expected to. Thought that I would. Kind of spent that whole offseason training, getting ready for spring training, thinking that I was going to play, and then never got a call for another team to play. Ended up in I helped coach the high school baseball team here with McKenzie that year. Still training, throwing, trying to hoping I would get a job. Ended up playing independent league that year in Southern Maryland, in
Mm-hmm.
Waldorf, Maryland for that summer. Finished that up in 2017 and decided that I didn't want to live that life. That's a difficult life in independent ball because you make
Yeah.
less money and the amenities are even worse than they were in the minor leagues. So decided that wasn't for me, and then decided that it was time to kind of start moving forward into the next aspect of life.
Okay. Personal question right now. Were you already married then when this was
I was
going on?
I was not. My wife and I started dating at the end of 2015, right before 2016, which was the year that I made it to the major leagues. And I always joke with her, she got in at the right time. She didn't have to go through every year of it, but no. And then, but she did go through the worst of it, because the year that I was in Maryland in independent ball was probably the most difficult year of all of that. And she did go through that with me and was amazingly supportive through all of it. But no, we ended up getting married in 2018, in November of 2018.
Well, and the reason I ask this is because I think, especially for the athletes who are older, I think that people don't necessarily pay attention to the partner, you know,
Yeah.
and how much that partner has to go through too, you know. So for you, that call that never came, like that had to have been an up and down roller coaster every day, and the
Yeah.
unknown that's going to
Yeah, it's
happen.
just waiting for a call every day and calling my agent and trying to reach out to anybody I know with other teams. And it was an up and down process, and it was obviously in the end it was a really disappointing process, but it was it ended up being what it was. And at the time it didn't make sense, and then now as I look back
Yeah.
at it, it's allowed me to be where I am, and I'm really happy with the life that I have now. Really happy to be married to Mariah. And I think that, if I continue to play and keep going through minor league seasons and I'm not back in the major leagues, like like you said, a lot of people don't pay attention to the partner, and that process, those seasons, the things we go through are not easy on the person that you're with.
No.
And, so there's no telling what would have happened on that end either.
Especially on the down parts,
Yeah.
several athletes on here have talked about just that process on their wives. Uh, and most of the women had not been married at the time, but yeah, just that whole process there. What got you through, besides Mariah, what got you through each day of that long process of the unknown?
You're talking about during 2016 when I wasn't getting signed or wasn't getting phone calls, or you're
Yes,
talking about through the
yes.
whole minor league journey?
No, no, after that, when you were waiting to see if you were going to play someplace else.
I think it was kind of what I always tried to do. It was just sticking to the process. I knew that if I did get a phone call and I hadn't been preparing every
Mhm.
day and training and throwing and doing the things that I needed to do, I wasn't going to be prepared. So it was just sticking to my day-to-day process and the things that I knew I had to do to be prepared. And if I allowed myself to be pissed off and start to get down in the dumps and start hating whoever wasn't calling or my agent for not getting me a job or whatever else, it wasn't going to do any good. I just had to go and work every day, and put in the time, and that kind of filled that void. And then, the time away from training was still just live life as normal and enjoy it.
That is a long process of the unknown and wondering what's going to happen next. When did you make that decision that I'm just done?
It was after 2017, whenever I was in independent ball. It was, and kind of transitioning into after that, it was my high school baseball coach, Jeremy Maddox, had moved on from McKenzie, and he was at Trinity Christian Academy in Jackson. And he had
Mhm.
called me two or three times during 2017. He said, "Hey, if you're not going to play anymore, I need an assistant coach. Come work with me. Come do this. Come do this." And I kind of brushed it off. I wanted to keep playing. And then at the end of 2017, Ryan and I talked, and it was like, "This is not worth it. I don't think that, this is it. This is kind of the end of the road with this, and it's time to transition into the next phase of our life." We had gotten engaged that year, and it was kind of time to read the writing on the wall, and also
Right.
do what was going to be best for our family. And so it kind of started to transition there.
What did you get out of coaching at Trinity Christian?
Everything. I got so much out of that. I can't say enough about the time I spent at Trinity Christian Academy in Jackson. From the head of school, Miss Brown, to the upper school principal, to Coach Maddox, to Coach Butler, who was the head football coach, and most importantly to the kids that were there at TCA.
Mm,
It kind of springboarded me into, it was my first experience really coaching. I mean, I helped at McKenzie some, but that was just in the off season. I didn't go through the
right.
full day to day. I wasn't seeing the kids at school every day. And it really taught me, I think, the value of what happens whenever I invest in other people and not always in myself.
Mm,
Because I
right.
think some of those kids that I taught and coached there are still some of the best relationships that we have. That was one of the first people that, one of the kids I coached there, he called me and Mariah mom and dad.
Oh,
Because we were so close with them. And it was one that, if they needed anything at any time of day or night, they would call. And we had a lot of conversations about life. It was kids that were getting ready to go to college and they didn't know where they should go to college. They didn't know if they should go to college. They didn't know if they should try to play sports. And just talking through those life things with them and trying to help them on the day to day, it gave me so much joy and so much enjoyment to be able to do that. And I'm forever grateful for the opportunity to do that to the people at TCA that allowed me to. And it was one of the best year and a half that I've spent in my entire life.
So then what got you to that next level? What got you to the Toronto Blue Jays?
Yeah, I think I was happy at TCA. I like I said, I enjoyed it drastically. I went to a coaching convention that off season. Ended up talking to another person that had played at Vanderbilt before I was there. That I had never actually met him in person, but I knew who he was. Introduced myself. We just started talking, and he said he was the farm director for the Toronto Blue Jays at the time, and he said, if we have anything come open, would you be interested? Yeah, of course. And then he called me a few weeks later and said, we have a position open. Do you want to interview? I said, yeah, I'll interview. I would love to interview for it. Went through multiple rounds of interviews, ended up getting offered the job. And then it was the decision of taking the job or not, because, as much as I just talked about the kids and the people at TCA, that wasn't an easy decision, as easy as it might sound, to go from coaching, being an assistant coach in high school, to coaching professionally. A lot of people say that they invest in people that they're around and that they're with, and they care about that more than themselves. But if you actually do, then that decision is not an easy one, because it's hard to leave the kids and the people that you care about so much and just move on. And so I think that process was a difficult one as well, but it was one that, at the end of the day, was the right thing for us, and it ended up working out well.
Well, and just recently, UConn's basketball coach, he turned down the job with the Lakers to
Yeah.
stay at UConn, and everybody was like freaking out about that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to go coach the Lakers. Um, even with the NIL issues in college, I still wouldn't
Yeah.
want to do that. Um, what do you so leaving playing baseball? How have you filled that void? Because I'm guessing coaching doesn't necessarily fill that void, or does it?
Uh, yeah, for me it does. I would say there's still an aspect of it of actually like physically competing.
Mhm.
And I play a lot of golf now, and so that's probably the way that physically I do it. But I mean, I play golf, a couple times a week. And so, but yeah, I think, I try to be as invested in our players as I wanted our players, or as I wanted coaches to be invested in me when I played. And
Right.
so, yeah, whenever we're out there pitching during the season, whether it's in low A or whether it's in triple A, or I'm sure if hopefully one day if it's in the major leagues, that, I'm living and dying on every pitch too. I'm feel like I'm competing with our pitchers that are on the mound. I am,
Right.
dissecting which pitches we're throwing and which counts, and a lot of that. And it's that it feels like competing to me too, because whether or not I'm actually the one throwing the pitch, I'm the one that's helping prepare these guys to go out and pitch. I'm the one that's responsible for trying to help them be the best that they can be and achieve their goal. And if I'm not doing that, or if we're not succeeding at it, then that's just like me giving up a home run myself when I was pitching. So yeah, that honestly, that question, I really do feel like I get the competitiveness out of coaching almost as much as I did playing.
Exercise wise, do you still have the same exercise regimen as you did as a player?
Um, I wouldn't say the same, but it's, as far as the intensity level, it's similar, if not better now. I think I obviously, as you get older, it becomes a little harder to stay in shape. But
It does.
I think I prioritize it a little more. I think when I played, the physical side of the game wasn't as big, especially in baseball, because it was thought baseball players shouldn't lift weights as much, especially heavy weights, and you should just
Right.
run and be, have cardio. Where now the game has really evolved and sports science has come in, and we understand the body and the movements a lot better. And so I think me learning that since I've been with the Blue Jays has honestly helped me want to prioritize like my health and exercise, lifting, cardiovascular health, things like that, even more.
Okay. Um, what do you, if you can look back now on your whole career so far, is there one moment, one failure, one highlight that you think really just was a pivotal turning point for you? And that may be a
I don't know.
difficult
I mean,
question.
I remember a lot of them. I remember almost all of them. there's a lot of things like ups and downs. I remember giving up a home run to a kid from Humboldt in a region tournament game when I was in high school that was detrimental. I remember giving up a walk-off hit to a kid from Lexington that ended up being my teammate at Bethel my junior year of high school in a game, and the mistake that was. I remember I pitched we were talking about the super regional at Florida State where we almost made it to Omaha. I remember giving up a double to right center to somebody that drove in a couple of runs after I came into the game. I think I remember all of them, and I don't know that any of them were an overarching, lasting impact, but I think they all were kind of small impacts day to day that drove me to try to be better and make improvements and get better.
Is there an aspect of playing that you miss that you're not getting now as a coach?
Um, like I said, the competitive side of it fulfills me almost the
Mhm.
same. I think it's just the fact of having the ball in your hand and actually controlling that. And,
Yeah.
even when we succeed now and our pitchers pitch really well and things go great, I feel a really good sense of pride, but you never feel as much sense of pride, I don't think, as you do when you're actually the one that accomplishes it physically. So I think that would be the only thing. But like I said, I feel really lucky and fulfilled that my transition from playing to now coaching has fulfilled me so much to the point to where I feel happy and I enjoy what I get to do
Right.
every single day so much.
I would think that coaching makes you more patient.
Depends if you're asking me or my wife.
Well, because as a player, like you're in control, like you're the one throwing the pitching the ball. But now as a coach, you're having to, I think, slow down everything because it's not in your hands.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I think that I think you see the. I wish that I could have been my own coach now when I played because I think you start to understand things and you start to see the bigger picture of things and you start to see that just because we either succeeded or didn't succeed on one day out of 152 games
Right.
doesn't make the whole season. Doesn't mean if you give up one home run that you're not getting called up the next day, or if you throw one inning and you strike out all three people that you are getting called up the next day. Like I think that seeing the bigger picture, and to your point, that probably makes it a little more patient because you understand all the things that go into decision making. You understand all the things that go into as minor as who gets to pitch in the game that night and who doesn't. You get to
Right.
see a broader aspect of things, and I think when we can zone out and see that 10,000 foot view, and then also apply it at the on the hands-on level, it definitely helps, and it helps to put things into perspective for guys sometimes.
For me, as I've gotten older, I've have a little bit of anxiety on a regular basis if there's things that I can't control, obviously. And I have found lately that just I have a little saying, and I'm not big into motivational quotes and things like that, but I have a little saying that I put up that says, "Today does not define me."
Yeah.
And I keep that up to remind myself that what is happening right now is not what's going to happen tomorrow or in the future, but also to remind myself that I can take action right now to also change what's going to happen. And that's kind of helped me a little bit. Um, what has helped you overcome some of your struggles with, as we talked about, with trying to let those things go and know that you know things can change at a moment's notice?
Um, Sorry, what has helped me with which part of it? I apologize.
Oh, that's okay. What helps you with those struggles mentally of that you've had in the past when you were playing, about you have a moment, and that moment is not defined does not define you?
Yeah, I think as a player and as an athlete, a lot of times like you get labeled as the athlete, right? Like you get labeled, who
Mhm.
you are is tied into what you do. And I think for me, having Mariah, having our two dogs, having a life away from the field, I still am caught up into what's going on at the field a lot of times. But having another identity, having something
Yeah.
that makes you more than just Drew that plays or Drew that coaches, I
Right.
think gives you more purpose. And I think as we were talking earlier, if you really dive in and you really understand your players as people and they aren't just chess pieces for you as well, then that helps because you're talking to the player whose wife they just found out she was pregnant, or
Yeah.
they're something's happened to a family member and they need to go home for a couple of days, or they don't want to go home and they're trying to deal with their family member being sick while they're also trying to pitch to get to the major leagues. So I think being able to have multiple, not just be defined by what you do
Right.
and being an athlete. I think being able to be something that's more important than that has really helped me to kind of step away and hopefully be a better person in that sense, and not be as selfish and caught up into only what's going on with me.
Last question. What would you tell a 9-year-old Drew? Like, if you could go back and talk to yourself at 9 years old, what would you tell yourself?
I think we talked about a little bit earlier whenever we were talking about like what I took away from when I was in the major leagues is like, you know, being myself is enough. I think
Mm,
being who I am is enough. Just because of where you are or who you are, or the setting that you're in, just because you're from McKenzie, a town of 5,000, and you go pitch in the major leagues, or you go coach in Buffalo, New York in AAA for a major league organization, you don't have to be more. Like, who you are is okay.
right.
And don't try to be somebody different. Don't not talk because you don't think you fit in. Don't try to talk more because you think that you have to. I think I thought about this some in the last few days. Like, we always talk about the small fish in the big pond and the big fish in the small pond, right? And that was something
Hmm.
that people said a lot about people from small towns, that, oh, they
Yes.
were the big fish in the small pond, and then when they go to the SEC, when they go do this, they're going to be the small fish in the big pond. It's like, I thought about it. It's like, you're still the same fish. It doesn't matter what size pond you're in. You're still
That's true.
yourself, and it's
It's
still
true.
okay to be the same as you were in the small pond. It's okay to be the same in the big pond. I think having that mindset would have helped me more at a younger age, and hopefully I'm starting to adapt more of that mindset now, and I feel like it's helping me with where I am currently.
Okay. Where can everybody find you online, or can they find you online?
On Instagram and Twitter, I think it's at Drew Hayes 13.
Okay.
I don't post a lot, but I
No,
post
you
pictures
don't.
of me and my wife on Instagram. That's about it.
No, I'll put that in the show notes. I mean, there may be some baseball kids that want to reach out to you, or some
Yeah, of
people
course.
from the hometown that
Absolutely.
don't necessarily know you and want to know
Yeah.
more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Drew, thank you so much for doing this for me today. I appreciate it.
No, this was so much fun. Thanks for talking. It was really good to catch up and be able to connect on some McKinsey things and talk to each other. So I really enjoyed it. I really appreciate you having me on.
Thank you. Thank you all for listening, especially if you've made it all the way to this part of the show. I appreciate all your support. Another reminder to subscribe to the show wherever you listen or watch. My mantra is like, share, and review. Follow us on social media at 5THQRT Podcast. Until next time, remember, change is our ally and it paves the way for greatness. Stay inspired. Have a great rest of the week. Hey everyone, a quick scheduling update. The Fifth Quarter Podcast is moving from a weekly show to an every other week schedule. Thank you so much for your support. I'm excited to keep sharing these amazing journeys with you.